But we begin our coverage tonight with the startling indictment of 9 U.S. citizens who are now facing charges of planning and preparing for war on the United States government. All are alleged to be members of a Christian-oriented, Michigan-based militia that, in the words of the Justice Department, was conspiring to levy war against the United States and to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. Now, even though 9 militia members have been indicted, you will notice that there are only 8 mugshots in this image. That's because the 9th member of this militia who was indicted is believed to still be on the run tonight. He is the 21-year-old son of the self-styled leader of this group. Now, investigators say all of those indicted are members of something called the Hutaree militia in southern Michigan. They were swept up over the weekend in a series of surprise raids conducted by the FBI. On Saturday night, FBI agents swarmed a rural wooded property in Adrian, Michigan. That's believed to be the home of the Hutaree militia's leader, a man named David Stone. As that raid was happening, FBI agents in Ohio simultaneously raided 2 homes there and arrested a pair of Hutaree militia members. And law enforcement officials in Hammond, Indiana, were raiding yet another home, arresting 1 militia there. The Hutaree are apparently a known militia in Michigan. The FBI says they've been following this group for a long time now. What does the word Hutaree mean? Well, according to prosecutors, they say it means nothing. They think it's just a made-up word that these militia members ascribed to their group because they thought it sounded religious. They wanted to be thought of as Christian warriors. If you go to the Hutaree website, it's clear that this is a religion-based group. The group says it's preparing to fight the Antichrist. It's peppered with theological statements about rapture. And right underneath the picture of the militia members posing with their guns on the front page of their website is this quote: "Preparing for the end-time battles to keep the testimony of Jesus Christ alive." The Hutaree logo is inscribed with the letters CCR. According to their website, that CCR stands for Colonial Christian Republic. Can't help you with the colonial part of it. The website contains a bunch of military-style training videos. According to the wife of one of the men who's been arrested, the group would go out into the woods and train on survival skills about once a month. One of the videos they have posted shows the group setting fire to a United Nations flag, the symbol of what they apparently believe is a coming one-world government. Now, the Justice Department indictment says the Hutaree viewed local and state and federal law enforcement officials all as their enemy. They refer to all law enforcement officers as the Brotherhood. One of the men who was indicted today, Joshua John Clough, appears to be the author of a web post from earlier this month in which he warns, quote, "If you are currently a cop, you are the enforcement arm of the enemy. Don't try to kid yourself otherwise." It's this obsession with police that the Hutaree apparently hoped would help them make their big splash. The FBI alleges that Hutaree members discussed a number of possible scenarios in which they would kill a police officer in order to set off what they hoped would be a larger chain of violent events. According to the indictment, they discussed killing a member of law enforcement after a traffic stop. They discussed killing a member of law enforcement and his or her family at their home. They discussed ambushing a member of law enforcement in a rural area. They also allegedly discussed luring a member of law enforcement with a false 911 emergency call and then killing that officer when he or she arrived on the scene. Once they managed to kill a police officer, their alleged plan was to wait for the police officer's funeral. And then they would ambush the large number of other law enforcement officers who would be expected to attend that funeral. Investigators say the plan was to attack law enforcement vehicles during the funeral procession using homemade bombs. The militia would then retreat to designated rally points, which would be protected with tripwired IEDs, improvised explosive devices. According to the Justice Department, quote, "It's believed by the Hutaree that this engagement would then serve as a catalyst for a more widespread uprising against the government." That was apparently the goal here, sparking some kind of civil war to overthrow the U.S. government by force. As I noted before, the FBI has had its eyes on this group for a long time. A local Detroit news station, Local 4, is reporting that the FBI had infiltrated the group for several months. Well, if the FBI had infiltrated them, that may explain why these militia members were arrested now. Investigators say the Hutaree were planning to strike sometime very soon, sometime next month, sometime in April. Hutaree members were allegedly planning what's described as a covert reconnaissance exercise that they had been training for months now. They were reportedly planning to stake out a police gathering that was set for April. The U.S. attorney in Michigan saying that the group had decided that if some random member of the public, stumbled across the group during its reconnaissance exercise, that person could be killed. So they were arrested, presumably now, in order to avert that planned attack. The militia members who were arrested over the weekend and the 9th, who remains a fugitive right now, were charged today on a total of 5 counts. 1 count of seditious conspiracy, 1 count of attempting to use weapons of mass destruction, 1 count of teaching and demonstrating the use of explosive materials, and 2 counts of carrying, using, and possessing a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. That first charge, seditious conspiracy, is one of the charges that landed the blind sheik, Abdelrahman, in jail for life back in 1995 after the first World Trade Center bombing. At the time, the New York Times described seditious conspiracy as a, quote, obscure 19th century law that makes it a crime to conspire to overthrow or put down or destroy by force the government of the United States. Interesting thing about seditious conspiracy, you don't actually have to be caught actively trying to wage war on the United States in order to be found guilty of seditious conspiracy. Planning it, conspiring, even if you don't do anything about it, is enough to be guilty of that. One of the other interesting charges here is teaching and demonstrating the use of explosive materials. 2 of the 9 defendants are facing that charge. Federal law makes it illegal to teach or demonstrate to any person the making or use of an explosive, a destructive device, or a weapon of mass destruction, knowing that such person intends to use the teaching in furtherance of an activity that constitutes a federal crime of violence. In this case, that federal crime of violence was this militia's alleged intent to wage war on the United States government. I also have to tell you, this has just broken right this second while I've been talking to you. We've just learned from the Associated Press that the FBI has apprehended the 9th member of this militia who, as of the start of me talking about this moments ago, was still on the run. The dateline on the AP story on this is Wheatland Township, Michigan. But again, the last of the 9 militia members charged with plotting to kill police officers and charged with seditious conspiracy to wage war on the government of the United States has been apprehended after a search in a rural part of Michigan. Joining us now is Ed Brayton. Ed Brayton is the state editor for the Michigan Messenger. Mr. Brayton, thanks very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Good to be back with you, Rachel.
As you just heard, we've just had word that the last of the 9 suspects in this case has been apprehended. Had you ever heard of this Hutaree militia group before these arrests were announced over the weekend?
I had not. You know, that we have a lot of militia groups in the state of Michigan. Of course, the Michigan militia became famous during the Oklahoma City bombing and the aftermath of that in the early 90s. But we've got about 11. The Southern Poverty Law Center says we have 11 militia groups in the state, and the Hutaree is not one that I had ever heard of. And in fact, I find it hard to say it without giggling. It sounds to me like the Hakawi tribe from F Troop, and I sort of keep waiting to see Larry Storch's mugshot in one of these pictures.
It is a strange combination of absurd and scary. You look at the details, for example, that they've posted on their website about the different ranks that they give one another and all these made-up words that sound like they're straight out of a Calvin and Hobbes strip. And then you realize, oh, they're actually plotting to kill police officers, and they have advanced weaponry, and they're doing military training, and they've been charged with incredibly serious crimes. It's sort of hard to know, I guess, how to contextualize them on the seriousness scale.
Yeah, I think we have in our minds, we sort of think of these people as just, you know, going out on the weekends and playing dress up and playing army, but clearly some of them are very serious about this, and we need to keep an eye on them. There's a reason why the FBI is infiltrating these groups, because they really can be very dangerous.
I know, Ed, that you've spent a lot of time since these arrests have been announced digging into all the tracks of this group online. Of all of the different militia groups that are out there, are you noticing anything that is unique or different about this one? Obviously, the first thing that jumps out is the theology being so front and center with them.
Yeah, you know, when you look at these militia groups, they all have one thing in common, and that is that all across the nation, they all believe that there is an inevitable war coming, and a lot of them refer to this as a second civil war. a war with the government, and they all believe that we are inexorably leading toward that day, that that day is imminent, that we're going to have that war. Now, there's a certain faction of these groups that also believes that that war is going to be a race war, and that's sort of the KKK Aryan Nation faction. Now, this group does not appear to be one of those. This group, in fact, sort of chased off one of those people from their message board. Two of the men who've been arrested actually sort of chased him off, someone who came to their message board spewing anti-Semitic and racist rhetoric. They don't appear to be part of that group. But what is unique about them is the religious element of this, that they believe that this inevitable war is a war against the Antichrist, a war against Satan, and that it will be the cataclysmic event that will sort of hasten the return of Christ, after which, as you mentioned in your introduction, they will establish this colonial Christian republic. That's what makes this group sort of stand out from the rest of them. They're sort of the wingnuts, if you will.